A Wisconsin laboratory, 1949. 8 rhesus monkeys, 1 little mechanical puzzle. Pull the pin, slide the hook, lift the lid. Nobody taught them. Nobody fed them a single raisin for trying. And yet the monkeys hunched over those latches with focus, patience, something that looked a lot like joy, and cracked the code again and again. That was strange. Science had 2 settled answers for why any creature does anything: to survive or to chase a reward. These monkeys were doing neither. So the scientist did the obvious thing. He introduced a reward, food for every solve. And here's the moment that should have changed the world. The monkeys got worse, slower, sloppier, less interested. Reward the behavior, and the behavior fell apart. Hold on to that, because for 60 years, almost nobody did. Stay with me, and by the end, you'll know the surprising truth about what actually drives us, at work, in school, in your own head. The scientist was Harry Harlow, and he had stumbled onto something enormous. He gave it a name: intrinsic motivation, a third drive. The performance of the task, he wrote, provided its own reward. Then he dropped it, never seriously chased it again. The findings sat in a journal, gathering dust, too weird to fit the machine. 20 years later, a graduate student would trip over the exact same wall, and this time refused to look away. Summer, 1969. Carnegie Mellon. A young psychologist named Edward Deci sits people down with a soma cube, 7 plastic pieces you twist into shapes, and watches them through a one-way window. Here's the trick. He splits them in 2. One group he pays $1 for every shape they build. The other group, nothing. Then, partway through, he leaves the room and secretly times what each person does with 8 free minutes and no one watching. The unpaid group keeps playing. They can't help it. The puzzle is fun. The paid group? The moment the money stops, they put the cube down and reach for a magazine. Deci's conclusion was quiet and radical. When you pay someone for something they already love, you can make them love it less. The reward doesn't just fail, it corrodes. Now, why would anyone ignore results like that for decades? Because the opposite idea was so useful, it had become invisible. Think of human motivation like an operating system. Version 1.0 was simple survival. Then, as we built farms and factories and companies, we upgraded to motivation 2.0. Reward the good, punish the bad. Carrots and sticks. Frederick Taylor with his stopwatch, turning workers into predictable, well-oiled parts. And it worked. It built the modern economy. For routine, mechanical labor, if-then rewards, if you do this, then you get that, are a perfectly good engine. But an operating system only survives as long as the world it was built for, and around us, quietly, that world was already gone. Picture 1995. 2 encyclopedias are about to be born. The first has everything money can buy: a giant software company, paid professional writers and editors, a marketing budget. The second has none of that. Just volunteers, working for free, in their spare time, because they feel like it. Ask any economist which one is standing in 15 years. They'd laugh and point at the money. They'd be wrong. On October 31st, 2009, Microsoft pulled the plug on Encarta. Wikipedia, unpaid, unbossed, unbribed, had become the largest encyclopedia the world has ever seen. The people who got nothing crushed the people who got paid. Carrots and sticks couldn't explain it. So what could? Pink's whole book turns on one uncomfortable sentence. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. Look at what work had become. The routine stuff, the algorithmic tasks, the follow-the-rules jobs, was being automated or shipped overseas. What was left for humans was the other kind: creative, open-ended, heuristic work with no map. The invent it, figure it out work. And on exactly that kind of work, the old carrot and stick engine doesn't just stall, it goes into reverse. To see why, you have to watch what a reward actually does to the mind. Remember Tom Sawyer, tricked into whitewashing a fence? He makes it look so delicious that the other boys pay him for the privilege of doing his chore. Mark Twain's lesson: you can turn work into play. Rewards run that magic in reverse. They can turn play into work. Watch it happen to children. Researchers found kids who loved to draw. Some they promised a shiny certificate for drawing. Others got nothing. 2 weeks later, the kids who'd been rewarded drew less, and with less joy. The prize had quietly rewritten the message in their heads. If they have to bribe me to do this, it must not be worth doing on its own. One reward, and a love became a labor. Pink calls it behavioral alchemy, and it doesn't stop at drawing. Here's a puzzle. You get a candle, a box of thumbtacks, and a book of matches. Attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip on the table. Go. Most people freeze. They try to tack the candle up. They try to melt it on. The trick, the leap, is to empty the box of tacks, tack the empty box to the wall, and stand the candle in it. The box wasn't a container. It was a shelf. Seeing that requires an open, wandering mind. Now the twist. A psychologist offered one group cash to solve it fast. Surely money sharpens you. It did the opposite. The rewarded group took, on average, 3.5 minutes longer. Because rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus. Great for a task with one clear path. Poison for a task that needs you to look sideways. Maybe the stakes were just too small. So economists went to rural India, where a little money goes a very long way, and offered people bonuses worth up to 5 months of pay. If money is the master key, these should have been the best performances of their lives. The people offered the biggest rewards did the worst. Across the games that took any real thinking, the fat bonus didn't light a fire. It lit an anxiety. The stakes got so loud, the mind seized up. 8 of 9 tasks, higher pay, lower performance. Not in spite of the reward, because of it. And it gets darker because a big enough carrot doesn't just dull the work, it bends the person. An Israeli daycare center was tired of parents picking up kids late, so it added a fine. Reasonable, right? Put a price on lateness. Late pickups promptly went up. The fine had erased the guilt and sold parents a clean excuse. I'm not late, I'm paying for extra time. Scale that up and you get the ugly stuff. Sales teams gaming their numbers, executives cooking the books to hit a bonus, corners cut on a car everyone knew wasn't safe. Point at a narrow target, dangle a big enough prize, and people will reach it, sometimes straight through the wall. So is the answer to burn every reward? No. And this is where Pink is more honest than his own headline. Because carrots aren't villains. They built the modern world, and for the right job, they still work beautifully. Give someone a boring routine, follow the steps task. There's no real love in it to crush, and a reward is a perfectly good little booster. For mechanical work, higher pay really does buy higher output. And money still matters everywhere. Pink is blunt. Pay people unfairly or too little, and you get nothing but resentment. The goal is to pay enough to take the question of money off the table, so people can think about the work instead of the paycheck. The fix isn't no rewards, it's smarter ones, not the controlling if-then carrot dangled before the task. A quiet now, that reward, a genuine thank you after the fact that says, I saw what you did and it mattered. His argument isn't reckless, it's this. For the creative work that increasingly defines us, we're running the wrong engine, and a better one has been sitting inside us the whole time. 2 young psychologists, Desi and his partner Richard Ryan, spent decades mapping that better engine. They found we come wired with 3 deep needs: to feel competent, to feel connected, and above all, to run our own lives. Pink sorts people into 2 fuels. Type X runs on the outside stuff, the reward, the deadline, the gold star. Type 1 runs on the inside, the work itself. And here's why it changes everything. Type X behavior is like coal, cheap, abundant, and it burns out, poisoning the air on the way. Type 1 behavior is like the sun, renewable, clean, effectively endless. He calls the upgrade Motivation 3.0, and underneath it lies the sentence this whole video turns on. Control gets you compliance. Autonomy gets you engagement. It rests on 3 pillars: autonomy, mastery, purpose. Start with autonomy, the desire to steer your own life. A software CEO named Jeff Gunther tried an experiment his own managers thought was insane. He told his people, I don't care when you arrive, when you leave, or whether you're here at all. I care what you produce. No schedules, no permission slips, just results. Picture the first rainy Friday. The office is a third full. A traditional boss would be panicking about all those empty chairs, all that time he's paying for and not seeing. Gunther is calm as a monk because he finally understands he was never buying their hours. He was buying their work. And people given real control don't coast. They come alive. We are, Pink says, born to be players, not pawns. Real autonomy, it turns out, has 4 flavors: freedom over your task, your time, your technique, and your team. Watch one company hand it over. At the software firm Atlassian, once a quarter, they tell engineers, for the next 24 hours, work on anything you want, any way you want, with anyone you want. Deliver something by tomorrow afternoon. They call it a FedEx day because you ship overnight. One wild day, no bosses, no agenda. And out of those unpaid, undirected hours came a steady stream of fixes and features the company would never have thought to order. Turns out, when you stop steering people, they don't drift. They build. This isn't new. Decades ago, a manufacturing company called 3M told its people to spend 15% of their time chasing their own harebrained ideas. One chemist used his to fiddle with a glue that barely stuck to anything. A failure by every metric. That failure became the Post-it note. A generation later, a young company called Google made the same bet. Engineers, 1 day a week, on projects of their own choosing. That 1 day a week grew Gmail. Google News. As one leader put it, just about all the good stuff bubbled up from that free time. Nobody assigned those breakthroughs. Nobody could have. They came from the one thing a carrot can't buy. A person following their own curiosity off the map. The second pillar is mastery, the itch to get better and better at something that matters. And to feel it, meet a frightened 10-year-old. Hungary, 1944. A boy crouches under a train seat as the war closes in, bullets snapping through the windows, relatives dying, the grown-up world collapsing into chaos. And a thought lodges in him. The adults had really no idea how to live. He would spend his life on that question. His name was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he discovered a state he called flow. Those moments so absorbing you lose the clock, lose yourself, become the thing you're doing. He clipped pagers on ordinary people and beeped them at random to ask, "How do you feel right now?" The answer reshaped psychology. We are most alive not while resting, but while stretched to our limit on something we love. Flow lives on a knife edge. Too easy, and you're bored. Too hard, and you're anxious. The sweet spot, a task not too hot, not too cold, but just past what you can already do. Pink calls a Goldilocks task. That's where mastery grows. And here's how badly we need it. In one study, people were paid well to do their jobs, but forbidden from ever entering flow, no deep absorption allowed. Within days, they started to unravel, edging toward the symptoms of an anxiety disorder. One test subject was so rattled, he walked straight into a wall. Flow, one of them said, isn't a luxury, it's the oxygen of the soul. Which raises the hard part. If flow feels this good, why is getting good at anything so relentlessly difficult? Because mastery obeys 3 stubborn laws. First, it's a mindset. Believe your abilities are fixed, a fixed hand you were dealt, and every setback is a verdict on you. Believe they can grow, and that same setback is just information. Same failure, 2 completely different futures. Second, mastery is a pain. There's no hack. The research is brutal and clear. World-class skill takes something like a decade of deliberate, uncomfortable practice, reaching for what you can't quite do, over and over. As one basketball legend put it, being a pro is doing the things you love on the days you don't feel like doing them. Grit, it turns out, predicts who makes it better than raw talent ever does. Third, the strangest law of all, mastery is an asymptote. A line you approach forever and never quite touch. Cézanne died still stalking the perfect painting. Golf's greatest players rebuild swings they've already perfected, chasing a mastery they admit they'll never fully reach. You'd think that would be crushing, to run at something you can never finish. It's the opposite. That gap is the whole point. Mastery attracts precisely because mastery eludes. The joy was never in arriving. It was in the reaching. Autonomy gets you moving. Mastery keeps you climbing. But there's one more thing that decides whether any of it means anything. The third pillar is purpose, the yearning to be part of something bigger than yourself. For most of the last century, business ran on a single word: profit. Pink doesn't sneer at it. Profit matters, he says. It funds everything. But he watched a new kind of company rise, one that treats purpose as an equal partner, not a slogan for the annual report. A shoe company builds its entire business on a promise: buy one pair, and a pair goes to a child who has none. Profit and purpose welded together, each making the other stronger. The most powerful organizations, Pink argues, use profit as the fuel and purpose as the reason for the trip. Purpose isn't only for companies. It's the quietest, most personal of the three. A writer once challenged a young president with a single sharp question. Great people, she said, can be summed up in one sentence. Lincoln's, he freed the slaves and saved the Union. Franklin Roosevelt's, he lifted us out of a depression and helped us win a war. So, she pressed him. What's your sentence? Sit with that. Not your job title, not your salary. One sentence at the end that says what you were for. Most of us never dare to ask. The people running on the third drive can't stop asking. But be careful what you point your life at, because you'll probably hit it. Psychologists followed a class of graduates out into the world. Some chased what they called profit goals: money, fame, looking good. Others chased purpose goals: growing, helping, connecting. Years later, the purpose group was thriving, satisfied, steady, well. The profit group had hit their targets too: the money, the status, the things. And they were no happier. Some were worse, more anxious, more hollow. They'd climbed the whole ladder and found it leaning against the wrong wall. You can win the game Motivation 2.0 taught you to play and still lose. So step back and see the shape of it. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. Not three tricks. One thing. The third drive Harlow glimpsed in those monkeys and couldn't explain. It was never that we're lazy animals who need a carrot and a stick. That was a story an industrial age told about us because it was convenient. The truth science kept finding and business kept ignoring is stranger and better. We are built to be curious, to master, to matter. Control the people around you, and you'll get compliance, enough to get by. Free them, stretch them, connect them to something that matters, and you get engagement. Their best. The thing no bonus can buy. Come back to that Wisconsin lab. 2 forgotten experiments. Monkeys and a puzzle, a student and a cube. Quietly told us who we are, and we spent decades not listening. Everything you were promised motivates you. The raise, the ranking, the gold star, turns out to be the weak fuel. Coal. The strong fuel was inside you the whole time. The desire to direct your own life, to get better at what you love, and to serve something beyond yourself. Renewable. Endless. Yours. Carrots and sticks are so last century. The question for this century, for your work, your kids, your own restless mind, is no longer how do I get people to do this? It's how do I set the drive that's already in there, free. If this rewired how you think about motivation, you'll want the book we're covering next on how tiny habits quietly run your life. We read them so you can live them. See you in the next one.